Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Adobe XD Masterclass. My name is Howard Pinsky. I'm a Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe. And a big good morning, afternoon, or evening to everyone joining me live here on Behance. If you are tuning in, throw your name in the chat and let me know where you're tuning in from. We've got Jack and Kara and Julia and Helmut and One Sock Wonder and who else we have? Eric asking for some kazoo time. I just can't follow Jason up. I just can't do it. I'm so musically challenged. It's just not going to happen. So no music from me, but we will have some cool stuff coming up in this masterclass today. So hope you're all doing well. Hope you're excited for the weekend. Hope you're designing, hopefully. We've got James from Nigeria and Mona from Florida. Nice. Welcome, everyone. Stephanie from Canada. Sweet. All right, so what do we have going on today? Well, let me hop over to my screen right over here. Hey, Lena. Hey, Ayush. If I mispronounce anyone's name, I do apologize. I'm not very good with names. But here's my screen. And this is Let's XD. I'm sure many of you who are learning XD or know XD pretty well have gone to Let's XD before. And, I created Let's XD about probably a year and a half ago, possibly. And it's gone really well. We're making changes. We're always adding new pages to help you out. We just also added a remote work page. So letsxd.com/remote-work. So if you are working remotely, either for the first time or you've been doing it for a while, we've got a ton of features within XD that will help you out, including co-editing, sharing features, and that sort of thing. And we just announced this morning that all of those features, all the sharing collaboration features, will be unlimited until October for all plans, including the free plan. So if you're on the free Adobe XD plan, you'll be able to share and collaborate unlimitedly until October. And we're doing this to really help people out who might be struggling, maybe working remote for the first time, kind of getting used to things. So yeah, that's a thing, which is great. There's also a brand new plugin, which I might show during this stream as well. But the reason I'm on Let's XD right now is, it's kind of looked the same for the most part for the last year and a half. And is the stream still going? I hope so, Tim. I hope so. Tim's internet died, so maybe it's not me. Let's see. No, I'm still there. Tim just, he probably can't hear me. I'm sorry, Tim. But it looks like we're good. Yeah, so it's kind of looked the same for the past year and a half. I've made a few little tweaks here and there, but I want to explore what the next version of Let's XD could potentially look like. And that's what we're going to do today. It probably won't be the final version of this, but at least it'll get us going, right? And I love using these streams to get some real work done. Just tackle two birds with one stone. So I'm going to hop over to Adobe XD. And throughout this stream, if any of you have ideas for what's needed on the next version of Let's XD, let me know. Now, before we start actually designing, we've got an artboard here, 1920 by 1080. I'm just going to rename this homepage. And I have a feeling that even though we have a full hour in front of us today, I have a feeling we might kind of use the next masterclass to tackle some more of this website. Who knows? We'll see what happens. All right, so before I get into the designing, I want to start using some plugins to help me lay out my thoughts and get some tasks going on. So my good friend Kenny, who works on the Adobe XD design team, put this plugin together. He's put a few plugins together, but Task List is one of his newest ones. And I have a few tasks that I've previously added in here. Make coffee, of course, record new XD challenge. I did that, but it didn't come out very well, so I didn't release it. And stay home. Stay home, please. So what I want to do is just add a few things that I might want on this particular homepage. One of the big things is a search field, because the current Let's XD website does not have a search field. And, it's probably necessary. And let's say design section, and maybe prototype section, collaborate, right? I should probably, can you rename things yet in this plugin? Probably not. That could be a good feature for Kenny. And maybe anchor links, because we do now support anchor links in Adobe XD. So that could be interesting. And I'm not sure what else, just again, let me know, maybe featured content, right? and maybe some animated elements. So I want to get through a bunch of these things today, at least for the home page, and then maybe if we have time, we'll tackle some of the sub pages, or maybe we'll tackle some of those next week. All right, so we've got our first page here, and this is going to be the home page. We're going to lay things out, make things look interesting, and one thing I kind of love is these curvy separators on web pages. So I want to start with that. Very basic stuff, hopefully. I'm going to grab my rectangle, and I'm going to draw one out across this artboard, leaving a little bit of room at the bottom so that people can see that there's additional information down there. And I might want this shape to be curved, and I could have done this with a pen tool, but I can also do it with a rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on this shape, and this will convert it into a path. And as you can see over here to the left in your layers panel, and I'm going to just pop a point somewhere right about here. Now, if I wanted to make sure it was very precise, I can drag out a guide, which is going to snap to the center of my artboard, and I'm going to double click again, and boop, there we go. I now have a point. Now, if I were to start dragging this around, it is a very sharp point, and we probably don't want that. So I'm going to double click, and this will convert that into a curve. And now what I'm able to do is select the point on the left, hold down Shift, select the point on the right, and I can just move this up and have a nice little curve going on. And if I need to adjust that, I can just grab that point in the middle, and there we go. I can also just pull this outwards a little bit as well to make that curve a little bit more drastic. There's a bunch of things you can do to adjust the curves on these sorts of things. And I should probably point out, someone's asking about the 5-minute challenges, letsxd.com/challenges. You can find those there. And also in about 2 hours, I think, I'm going to be live kicking off day 4 of the Daily Creative Challenge. So lots of challenges going on, especially if you're new to XD. Great stuff. All right, so we've got this shape on our artboard looking pretty good. I might want to add a little bit of color to this. Now, Let's XD right now is very dark, and I kind of like it. It's not bad. I also have a light mode at the top. So let's go ahead and start by designing the light mode. And I know Tim's going to bring up dark mode. Here's dark mode, Tim. There you go. We've got light mode, dark mode, but we want to start with the light mode at least. So I'm going to grab this shape here, which I'm going to just name background shape. And we'll go for a little bit of a blue, just very subtle. We don't want to go too crazy. Super subtle. If I turn off the border, we can kind of see that we have this nice blue color, and I might want to maybe drop this down just a touch, just like that. Perfect. All right. Now, the background currently is white, and that's not bad, but what I might want to do is just bring in a little bit of that blue color. So I'm going to sample it, and then I'm just going to bring it back a little bit. Again, super, super subtle. Many of you probably wouldn't even notice the difference, but I'm just going to just very subtly just make these changes just like that. Double click on the background to access the artboard, just like that. Super subtle, right? And now we have kind of the base of our landing page, which could start helping us to define what the rest look like. Now, there's a few things we need on this page. One, we obviously need a logo, and we're going to use the XD logo for that. So I'm going to hop over to Finder, and I've got right here, I've got an XD logo, bring it into XD, and I can pop it into place. Now that's a little bit too large. It's about 150 pixels. Logos probably don't need to be that large, so maybe I'll just drop it down. I don't know, something about there. And because this is just a mock-up that's going to be eventually developed, I'm not too concerned about perfect sizing. I'll get to that eventually, but right now I'm going to leave it somewhere right about here. Perfect. All right. Now, maybe I'll just bring this in a little bit as well, just so it's not too close to the edge. Munir is asking about XD in dark mode. I saw someone else ask about it. I mean, I see that all the time. Andrew Shorten responded to that person saying that it's a big undertaking. It's probably a bigger undertaking than a lot of you realize, and we have to prioritize those sorts of things. And especially with everything going on, there's a big focus on collaboration now. So we have to really make sure that we're working on features that are going to be beneficial to the majority of users using XD. And dark mode, while I love dark mode, I would love to see it in Adobe XD. It's probably not a high priority feature right now. Eventually, maybe. We'll see. All right, so we've got our logo here. Now, of course, over to the right, we might want some text links, for example, and we'll get to that in a moment. But maybe below, I might want to kind of go over what this website is, right? So I'm going to grab my text tool and we'll start with Let's XD. So I'm going to type out Let's, right? And I'm going to put XD on a separate line, and I'm going to show you why we're going to do that in a little bit. I'm going to make this nice and large so that you can really see it. In terms of the typeface, I've been on a Sophia Pro kick lately, and I'm going to go with a nice black font. Now, I typically try not to use the black weights when I'm not using all capital letters, because sometimes it throws it off a little bit. It's a little bit too thick, so I'll go to bold. But in this case, I really want the word Let's XD to stand out up there. So I'm going to do it, and I can always drop that down later on. So we've got Let's right there. Now, as I'm going through this process, I may also want to make sure that I'm saving all this information to my assets panel. That way, if I need to make changes later on, I can very easily do that. So I've got this selected, and I'm going to go ahead and press the plus button beside character styles. That's going to save it, and I'm going to just type out Let's XD header. There we go. Beautiful. I can also save this background color. Perfect. And maybe even the color on the artboard. There we go. I don't need, whoops. Delete this one. Perfect. All right. Hey, Michael, welcome. And Hakan is saying making the mark for export easier for users should be prioritized too. So let me know what exactly you mean by that, because there's a few ways you can mark elements for export. But there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes on collaboration and sharing features, so that could be one of them. But let me know exactly what you're talking about. So we've got Let's up here, and then down here we're going to do XD. We'll put a little period. Perfect. Now the reason I separated these two, and we'll get to this in a little bit later on, is because I might want some sort of an animation. Maybe when the page loads, it goes through like Let's Design, Let's Prototype, Let's Collaborate, and then Let's XD. So it could be a fun element over there. So we've got this header going on up here. It's looking pretty good. I'm going to group that. Let's XD. I want to make sure to keep all my layers nice and organized. Now down below, we might want a little bit of text explaining what exactly Let's XD is. So for that, I'm going to grab my text tool, and instead of single clicking to create point text, I'm going to click and drag to create area text, just like that. Now, obviously, that's way too big. So I'm going to just drop this quite a bit. Nice and small, because we want to fit a little bit of information in there. And maybe I'll drop it down to medium. We definitely don't want a very heavy font in that case. So let's go ahead and learn Adobe XD with in-depth tutorials and quick tips and tricks, right? So this will hopefully kind of get it across what exactly Let's XD is. And maybe I'll bump this up a little bit to maybe semi-bold. Double click, and there we go. So now we have a little bit of a header that kind of explains what Let's XD is. And if I go over to the current version, there really isn't that, right? There's a featured video at the top, which, by the way, I've also done a little bit of user research into this, and looking at the stats and analytics, a lot of people don't really look at the featured video at the top. They'll watch this video on a separate landing page or a separate page specifically to this video, but the featured video, unless it's something about like what's new in Adobe XD, this one doesn't get watched that much. So I would rather use some of this information to explain what exactly this website is all about. All right. Hopping back, I'm already out of breath. This is crazy. I think my allergies are just killing me this season. All right, so we've got our header, Let's XD. We've got a little bit of in-depth information on what this is. And now down below, one of the big things that we need is a search field. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my rectangle, my good trusty rectangle, draw one out just like this. And I want this search field to be very prominent, because usually when someone lands on a website like this, they know what they're looking for often, right? Of course, there are people who come here, don't really know what Adobe XD is, they don't know what Let's XD is, they don't know what content they're looking for, and that's totally fine. But a lot of people do. They want to know what components are, they want to know how to create an animated page indicator, and there needs to be a search function, which right now there isn't. So let's go ahead and build that. So we've got this box right over here, looking pretty good. I'm going to keep the color at white, but I'm going to drop the border just a touch so it's nice and subtle. I can also bring in some of this blue. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that and then just drop just like that. Very subtle, right? Now, this might be a little bit too subtle initially. You're taking a look at it and it's a white box on a fairly light background. So to really help pop it from the background, I want a little bit of a shadow. So I'm gonna go ahead and press on the check box. I don't know what a check box is. The check box beside shadow. And you know, I've talked a lot about shadows in the past, right? A lot of newer designers, they'll do something like this, right? Because they want to make sure that the box pops from the background. And you know, that's totally fine, but this is like 1990s. Yeah, stay away from this. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring this out from the box. So I'm gonna increase the Y value just like this, right? I'm also gonna blur it quite a bit. This will really help make that nice shadow, kind of very subtle. And for the color, I'm gonna actually sample this background color and then just pull this back a little bit and maybe give it a little bit of saturation just like that. And now we've essentially achieved the same effect, right? We've got a white box with a little bit of a border and a little bit of a shadow, and it pops really nicely from the background. So you don't really have to have those super harsh shadows back there to make it pop. You just gotta play around with the colors, play around with the blur, and you'll get something really nice. So we've got this looking good. We might also need a search icon, right? So I'm gonna hop over to my plugins panel. I'm gonna go to my icons for design, type out search, and of course, you know, I can very easily make a search icon, but we are short on time. So I'm gonna pop it in here. There we go, beautiful. And that's looking pretty good for the color. I might wanna just make sure I'm using this darkish gray over here, make sure it's nice and centered. I'll pop it about, let's say 42 pixels from the left. And then inside, I want to learn ... Because in this case, you know, we want users to know exactly what they're gonna search for. So they wanna learn something, probably. So that's what we're gonna go with. And I might want to go for a light font, drop it down just a little bit. There we go. Pop it into place, make sure it's nice and centered. That looks pretty good. And then over to the right, there's many ways you can actually start this process. A lot of people these days, at least in 2020, they know that when they type something inside of a search field, they'll press enter on their keyboard and something will happen, right? And of course, functionality wise, that's exactly what's gonna happen. But there are a very small percentage of people who still kind of move their cursor over and click on some sort of a search button. So in that case, you know, we might want something nice and subtle. We probably don't need a massive search button. Want to keep it nice and minimalistic. I'm going to turn on my grid, Command and Control apostrophe, and I maybe just want to create a little bit of an arrow, right? Grab my pen tool, something like that, right? And then something like that, right? Very simple. I'm going to make sure that the border is the same color as the text. Maybe increase the size a touch. Maybe. Looks good, possibly, yeah. And I'll make sure to center it. Just like that. And I'm also gonna make sure it's 42 pixels from the left, which is what the search field was on the left. Hey, Kenny, welcome. And Kenny, I don't know if you just joined, but if I hop over to my plugins panel, I am using your task list plugin, which I love. So I've got all the things that I kind of want to cover during this session. And I've got my search bar pretty much set. That's looking pretty good. So I'm going to turn on search field. And Kenny, if you just joined, one thing I would love to see, I don't think it has it now, is a way to rename some of these things. So if I misspelled something, I would love that. So feature request. All right, back to my layers panel. I just want to make sure to select all these elements, group them, and call this search. Bam. All right. So things are looking okay. You know, I definitely need some breathing room in this. So I might just want to select these two elements, drag them down a little bit, just to make sure that this page is breathing a touch, so that, you know, not everything's on top of each other. And I think, you know, now it's looking a little bit better. Now, of course, we've got this big area over here to the right that we need to fill out. So there's two things we're going to do. One, we're probably going to grab this information here and shift it over a little bit. But I might also want to use this area either for some sort of an illustration or maybe even a video at some point in the future. So what I'm going to do is hop over to Finder. I grab this great image an illustration from Adobe stock, and I think it could work really well. So I'm going to grab this, drag it directly into Adobe XD. And if you're new to XD, let me pop it over here. One of the coolest features is that you can bring in Illustrator files, you can bring in Photoshop files, and they all open, and all the vector layers are there, which is really nice. So I'm going to grab a few of these. I don't need the background. I'm going to grab, let's say, these guys over here. I probably don't need the magnify glass. I don't need the settings. So I'm just going to grab this information here, copy it, pop it over here, and I can just make this nice and large if I wanted to. Just make it a little bit larger, just like that, right? Now I have this really cool looking illustration on this page. And again, because all of this is vector, I can very easily dive in here and make changes. So the blue is working, the blue's not looking bad. I may keep it, I may not keep it, but one thing I can do is, because all of this is vector, I can hop into my assets, add this in here, edit, and just make changes. And you're going to notice it changes across all of them because they use the same gradient, which is really nice, right? Just make a few changes here. Maybe I'll just bring back that color a little bit just so it's not too vibrant. And there we go. I can also dive in here. Maybe the shadow's a little bit too strong. Just drop it just a touch. There we go. All right. And I do see Hakan is posting some suggestions for XD features in the chat. I will take a look at that later, but I want to make sure that I am tackling as much as I can on this design. Make sure to group all this. This will be called illustration. There we go. And again, I can probably grab some of this information and just move it inwards a little bit, just so we're not right on the edge, right? All right, so that's looking pretty good. It's getting there. It's not perfect, and of course we do need links at the top. I will get around to the links a little bit later, but there's a few things that we might want to do. Thinking through the process and the flow of this page. Now, down at the bottom, there might be a few sections for design videos, prototyping videos, collaboration videos, and we want to actually start laying some of that stuff out, and then we'll get to anchor links and actually show how to use those icons to link down to the various sections. Now, knowing that there's going to be a lot down at the bottom, I might want to extend this artboard a touch. So I'm going to just grab the handle at the bottom and just pull it down. I'm going to pull it down a lot. I can always, make that a little bit smaller if I need to, but I definitely know that there's going to be a lot of information down there. Now, right up here, because again, if I play this, right, we've got a pretty nice, clean looking page, but when someone lands here, even though they see this kind of separator, they might not know that something's down there. So what I want to do is kind of put some sort of an icon to kick off the designing section. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to grab my rectangle, draw out a square just like this, make sure it's nice and centered in my document. I can also use my alignment options. Boop, there we go. And now it's centered. I'm going to round out the corners a little bit. I'm going to round them out quite a bit actually, just so that, we have a nice look to this. I'm going to turn off the border, and I'm going to add a very similar shadow to what I added here. So I'm actually going to copy this. I'm going to paste the appearance. So I'm going to right click, paste appearance. It also brought over the rounded corners, or the non-rounded corners in the search bar's case. And maybe because it's on a lighter background, I'm going to drop the shadow's opacity just a little bit, just so it's not super crazy. There we go. All right, so now inside here, we might want an icon that indicates design of some sort. Now, I was going to create my own icon, but we're short on time. So I actually have Nucleo open. So I'm going to grab this icon, just drag it in here. It's a great icon. It's going to work perfectly for a design section. And maybe I'll just make it a little bit larger. There we go. Now that's obviously a little bit too light, so I'm going to use that as the base and just kind of drop this a little bit. I can add a little bit of blue in there and just keep dropping it until it looks pretty good. Of course, I can also test out what this looks like. Yeah, not bad. What about this? That's not too bad. I don't know. I'm going to stick with the darker color just for now. I can always experiment with some colors later. And it could be fun to kind of color code each of the sections. So you have design as, let's say, pink, prototyping as green or blue. Probably blue would make sense considering there's the prototype wires are blue. Collaborate might be green, who knows, right? But for now, we'll keep those colors pretty basic. I'm gonna make sure to group these. I'm gonna call this design icon. Hey Cody, welcome. Great to see you in here. Cody's a great illustrator, by the way. Check out our stuff. All right, so we've got that icon looking pretty good. I might actually just drop this a little bit, just make it a little bit darker. There we go. I think that feels a little bit better. Okay, so this is the design section. Now down below, we might want to start illustrating what some of these videos might look like. I'm actually going to start dragging out some guides, just so we have things kind of aligned, and that was 210, I think. Right, there we go, 210, perfect. All right, that looks good. Now I might want 3 videos going across in each row, and might have 2 or 3 different rows, because I don't want the thumbnails to be too small. So we're gonna go with 3. So now I showed off this tip yesterday during my creative challenge. I've got my rectangle, and of course you could go ahead and guess kind of how big this is, and and then kind of duplicate one across. No one wants to do that. So what I'm gonna grab the rectangle, draw one out across like this, and then over here in the properties inspector, you can actually start using math. So I'm gonna divide by 3, right? And let's say I wanted 8 pixels in between each one. So I'm gonna minus 8, right? And you could have done the whole thing in one. So I think it was 1500. 1500 divided by 3 minus 8. So now what you can do is I'm going to hit the repeat grid button over to the right, boop, and then just drag these out. And look at that. Everything fits really nicely. But it's about 12 pixels, that's fine. I probably did the math wrong, there's whatever, but at least everything fits really nicely, right? And of course I might want some additional space in between these. So I'm just gonna bring these back a little bit. Now, before I add the repeat grid again, there's some additional information that we might want for these videos. We might want a title, for example, and we might want a description of what each video is. So I'm gonna grab my text tool, and let's go ahead and type out title of video. I'll make this probably semi-bold. I'm gonna also sample that color up here. I do like that color quite a bit, so I'm gonna make sure to add that into my assets panel, just like that. And then down below, we're also going to drag out some text. Description of video. Now I do know that there'll probably be 2 lines possibly, so I'll just go ahead and type out line 2, just so I can kind of plan ahead. And because of this is the description, words are hard, especially when you're streaming live, I definitely want to drop this quite a bit, and maybe instead of semi-bold, maybe go for medium. We do want it fairly legible. So I'm going to drop that touch. Maybe I'll go up a little bit more. These descriptions won't be very long, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Hazel's asking, why did we subtract 8? So my initial thought was that if I subtracted 8 from the rectangle, it would give me a little bit of room for padding, and it totally did, but it didn't give me the 8 pixels that I wanted to. I probably missed something along the way. But yeah, it just gave me a little, because if I just did divided by 3 and I dragged out a repeat grid, all of those boxes would be basically on top of each other. So the minus 8 gave me a little bit of extra room for padding. All right, I might just want to drop this just a touch, ever so slightly, maybe 70%. All right, perfect. So we've got our title, we've got our description. I'm going to make sure things breathe a little bit. That looks pretty good. I might adjust some of the colors at some point. And now I can go ahead and select all these, repeat grid just like we did before. And by the way, the shortcut for repeat grid is Command or Control R if you want to very easily do that. And there we go. Perfect. That lines up quite nicely, actually. Perfect. All right. So we've got that done, and we might also want another row down below. I'm going to do that, make sure these are spaced out quite nicely. I think it looks pretty good. All right. Now, of course, we need some content, right? We need videos that are in the design world. So what I'm going to do, just to make this a little bit more of a real world project, hop into Finder, and I've got a whole folder full of thumbnails for my videos. So I'm going to just go ahead and let's let's say repeat grids is designing responsive resize. How many do we have? We have 6 of them, I think. So 2 states is probably, well, states, yeah, it's a little bit of design, a little bit of prototyping, but we'll just grab it anyway. So that's 3. Content aware layout is designing. Blend modes, that's 5, and then assets, right? I can just drag these directly into Adobe XD, into any of one of the grids, and there we go. We now have our thumbnails in place. Now, I should also probably point out that, you know, these ratios are 16:9. So what you can do, if you didn't kind of tackle that initially, you can double click, pull these in, and you'll notice right about there. Perfect. That looks pretty good. Drag this back up. And now I can go ahead and adjust the spacing one more time. Perfect. All right, so let's see how things are looking. Go ahead and press the play button at the top. We've got our header image, and of course we do need some additional work up there, but we also have this area down here that kind of lets people know that, you know, there's something possibly down there. So if they start scrolling, they've got some videos down there all about designing in Adobe XD. Now I could just make sure to move this up a little bit, right? I could also, if I wanted to, let's see what this looks like. Let me move this down a little bit so it kind of hangs off. Maybe I'll move this down a touch, right? Make this a little bit larger. I can always grab all these elements, move these down a little bit. Just there's a little bit of breathing room at the top. And there we go. I don't know if maybe it should be hanging off the bottom. I mean, this is all part of the design process. You make one little tweak, you think to yourself, I don't know, is that working or not? I don't know. Let's go ahead and backtrack and see what that looks like. I mean, I kind of like it like that. I don't know. Let me know in the chat what you think. Should it be hanging off the bottom, or it should be kind of just always visible up here? I can't decide, but maybe some of you have better insights than I do. All right. So with that done, excuse me, now we can start creating the other section. So we might want a prototyping section and maybe a collaboration section, something like that. But we may also want to kind of break up some of these sections and maybe have a featured video or some sort of call to action, for example. If I hop over to Let's XD now, you know, after the designing section, there's this call to action. If there's any sketch users that are, you know, looking to bring their content into XD, maybe for prototyping purposes, or their company's switching over, whatever it might be. So we might want to put something like this inside of the 2 sections. So for that, very simply, I'm going to just grab my rectangle, draw one out. Now, considering this may be a video, for example, we might want to make sure that the aspect ratio is the same. So I'm going to just go, let's say 1280 by 720 is a video size, and that's probably a little bit too large, so I'm going to drop it down to about halfway, just like that, right? And maybe let's grab a video, or a thumbnail at least, and let's go for, what video would look pretty good in this area? Maybe the video on anchor links. I'll pop that in there, right? Now over to the right, we might want some information about what this video exactly is. So I'm going to grab the text tool, featured content. I want this one to really stand out, so I'm going to go ahead and increase that. Maybe I'll bump it up to black, possibly. Right, something like that. We are using, I believe, that same color we were using before. We can also use the heading text color, just like that. Now down below, we might want some additional information on what this is. And because we kind of have this already, I'm simply going to hop into the repeat grid. I'm going to copy this, paste it, and just drag it over. Now, because this section is a little bit larger than the repeat grids, I could go ahead and just bump up the size a little bit, double click, there we go, right? And then usually these sections, they're used to lead to somewhere else. You know, people who are browsing this area here, they usually know to click on some of these to go to another page. But here, they may not know, so we might want to create a button of some sort. I'm gonna grab the rectangle, draw out a button just like this, a nice large button. And in terms of the color, you know, you can never go wrong with a blue button. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a nice blue color. And then on the inside, I'm just going to type out primary CTA, just like that, right? I'm gonna make this white, and I might want to bump up the weight to about bold, because this is something that I want users to kind of pay attention to. There we go. Makes it a little bit larger. And of course, as I've covered in the past, content-aware layout is now in Adobe XD, so we might want to add some padding so that we can very easily make changes to this button later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all these elements. I'm going to hop over to my assets panel, which I was already in, and I might want to turn this into a component. So I'm going to go ahead and press that primary button. And now over to the right within the properties inspector, I want to make sure to turn on padding. And this will look at the relationship between that text layer and the background rectangle and automatically set padding. And the really cool thing about this is if I just want to type out, let's say, view more, something like that, the background automatically resizes. So you don't have to do some additional manual work in that sense. Perfect. All right. That's looking pretty good. I would probably make some of this content a little bit larger. Let me just bump this up a touch. Maybe bump this up a little bit, and then move this down a touch. And I'll just make this breathe just like some of the other information. There we go. And I can also add a little bit of a border on this because, you know, some of the areas over here kind of blend in with the background. So a very subtle border would help a little bit, just like that. All right, so we've got that done. We're kind of breaking things up. I'm gonna make sure to group this, call this featured content. I also want to rename this to designing videos. And I'm gonna just move some of this stuff down. Again, just so things breathe. You don't want to squish things. If people are interested in the content, they're going to scroll. You don't want to squish everything together. So we've got that looking good. And now what we can do is we can just reuse some of these elements. So this might be the prototyping section down here. I'm gonna drag this down, and this is going to be prototyping, right? Now, of course, that icon probably doesn't make sense. So we need to create a new icon. Now, I looked around, I couldn't really find a prototyping based icon. So let's go ahead and dive in here. I'm going to rename this prototyping. And by the way, I should learn how to spell prototyping. I'm actually gonna hop into my plugins, and I have the design section done. Prototyping is almost done. Anchor links I haven't done. Featured content I have done, and I haven't done animated elements just yet. So we've got a few things knocked off the list, but we do want to finish the prototyping section. So to do that icon, what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete that, and let's go ahead and let's do this. I'm going to grab a rectangle, draw one out just like that, and I might want to create that little wire. You know, that's on. If we hop into prototype mode and we click, I want to kind of recreate something like this, right? So let's go ahead and do that. I've got a rectangle. I'll worry about styling in just a second. And we might want a little bit of a line that goes out, right? I'm gonna make sure this is inside of that icon. Something like that. Make the border a little bit thicker. And I want to kind of create a nice curve to this icon. So I'm going to double click on it. I'm going to add a point somewhere around about the middle. I'm going to double click on that. So now that we have this really nice looking line going on, right? We can start moving these points up and down. And then I can do something like this. Ooh, look at that. Now we have a nice prototype wire kind of sprouting out from our icon. Perfect. There we go. Now, the color of the prototype wire is usually blue, but because we're kind of going with the darker color for these icons, I want to make sure that I'm using the same color, which is this one here. I'm going to apply that as a border. I'm going to apply this as the fill. Now for this one on the left-hand side, it's not usually perfectly round. It's kind of usually connected with something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to round out the corners completely, but over here to the right in the properties inspector, I might want to sharpen up this edge here and this one over here. And now I have that looking good, and I can move this over, and I'll just round out the corners over here, right? Maybe I'll make this a little bit thicker, and I can always adjust. There we go. Adjust this. Ooh, that looks a little bit better, right? Perfect. And now we have a little prototyping wire that we can use for our icon. Make sure this is centered. And that looks pretty good. What do you think? Now, what I'm noticing now is that this icon is kind of getting lost in the mix of everything. And this maybe this is where you know, color coding could come into play. Maybe we'll tackle that at some point. But up here, you know, we had that background up here at the top, that curved rectangle. So it does help with the separation of this icon and the background. And then of course the shadow helped as well. But we need to figure out what we're going to do down here. I'm not sure yet, honestly, but we'll get to that eventually. So we've got this section here. This is our prototyping section. Make sure to name this prototyping videos, right? I'm going to group that proto, and I'll just grab this and the designing icon, group those, call this design. We got our featured content. Yeah, see, this is looking a little bit strange. We've got this featured content here, and we have this kind of icon floating around. It looks nice up here. I'm not sure exactly what we're going to do here yet. Of course, we could like do something similar like this, possibly. I don't know. Haven't figured that out yet, but we will figure it out eventually. All right, now of course we need some additional videos up in here. So I'm going to go over to Finder one more time. Let's find 6 prototyping style videos. So we've got, let's say, audio playback. Let's go for, got the fab menu. That was a great video, if I do say so myself. Maybe the flyout video, right? Animated number counter, that's always fun. Page indicators, how many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. Pull to refresh is always good. And then maybe basic transitions. Someone's saying, not sure about that prototyping icon. Well, I think the actual icon, like this little thing here, it probably works because that looks like a prototyping wire in Adobe XD. But I don't know if the actual white background is working, especially against the white background, the background behind it. So we'll have to play with that a little bit. But there we go. So now we've got some videos here of prototyping. We've got our icon, which again, I don't know. It's not looking great. Maybe we can change the background color. No, I don't know. We'll figure it out. But at least, like, you know, the top section is looking pretty good. I'm kind of liking the direction we're going. We've got about 10, 13 minutes left, something like that. All right. So what else do we have to tackle on this page? Of course, we need a collaboration section, but we'll get to that shortly. I do want to cover anchor links just a little bit. And, you know, what I'm thinking is that maybe over to the left over here, it might display the designing icon, the prototyping icon, the collaboration icon, and that will allow users to very quickly navigate between those sections. So what I'm able to do is I'm going to just grab this icon right here. I'm going to paste it somewhere about here. Now this is probably way too big, so I'm going to just drop it in size quite a bit, right? I'm also going to grab the prototyping icon, copy those, paste them over here, drop this in size, and because it's border based, I will have to make some changes to the line, which is totally fine, right? Drop that quite a bit, and now we have a much nicer looking icon. Make sure to group all that. Proto icon. I'm going to put all these in a group in just a second. And this is design icon. And then for the collaboration section, I actually have an icon over here. Here's an SVG that I can just pop in. Whoops. And this is the lovely little user icon at the top right-hand corner of Adobe XD. So I'll make that nice and small. Make sure everything lines up nicely. Almost there. And because this is vector, I can just grab these elements, sample, and now we have the same nice color that we've been using. All right. Let's see, how are things looking? Let me make sure these are all spaced out really nicely. Maybe I'll actually line it up with the XD at the bottom and kind of center this. Okay, that could work. I'm gonna name this collab icon. I'm gonna make sure to group all of these, and these will be called anchor links, right? Move these over a touch, and there we go. Perfect. Okay, so now that we have these anchor links looking pretty good. There's a few things that we need to do, right? First thing is if we press play at the top and we start to scroll, we lose those anchor links, which we definitely don't want to do. So what we first have to do is fix these into place. So I've got this whole group selected. Over here to the right in the Properties Inspector, turn on Fixed Position when scrolling. That way, they stay in place really nicely, right? So they're always going to be there. The next thing we want to do is actually wire these things up. So I'm going to hop into prototype mode. I'm going to select the design icon and simply drag that blue handle to this section here. Now, I could, drag it to any one of these areas or any one of these layers if they're ungrouped, but I'm going to pop it right there. And now if I press play, it just takes me right down there. Now I might want a little bit of padding above this icon here. So all I have to do in that case is just grab this handle over here to the left and just move it up just a little bit. What is that, about 42 pixels, something like that? There we go. Now I can do the exact same thing for the prototype wire. Drag this all the way down to the prototype icon, move this up about 42 pixels. There we go. I can also adjust the easing options if I wanted to. And this one was ease in and out, and you can also adjust both of those at the same time, but you know what? I'm gonna run with that. I think it was 0.6 seconds. Yep. I think that's what I did, right? Yep. All right, so now I can go to designing, I can go down to prototyping, and once I get to collaboration, I can do that as well. I can go back to design as well. So Dan says, should the circles be the same size on the icons? Which circles? Let me know which ones you're talking about, just so I can make sure I'm getting everything right. All right. Louis says, do you always pick 42 because of the hitchhikers? Maybe I do. All right, let's take one more quick look. I'm kind of liking the way things are looking up top. Of course, we need some links, but maybe we can very easily do that just so it's kind of looking a little bit better. I'm going to grab my text tool, type out home. Now this one is going to be home, so I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit darker, right? And maybe bump this up to bold. And then over to the right, we might want a Learn tab. Let's go for medium. And let's see what that looks like. All right. And what we want, what's new, I think we have. I'm just kind of looking at the Let's XD page. We got freebies. We've got resources. Now, of course, we might run into some issues in this area here because we have the illustrations a little bit large. So we might have to shrink that down or move some of the elements around. And again, they're all vector based. So download XD. And this one this is a call to action. So I might want to kind of replicate this styling here. So I can very easily do that. All right. Make sure all of these are nicely distributed from each other. Perfect. Yeah, so as you can see here, there's a little bit of conflicting going on. So what I can do is I can grab some of these elements, just move them down a touch. I can scale them down if I wanted to, right? Or I can grab the individual ones, move that down a little bit, move that down a touch. And then this isn't too bad back here, but what I can always do is just, get rid of some of these, or I can shift it down, and look at that. Isn't that fancy? All right, let's see what that looks like. The text looks a little bit large. Is it just me? Maybe it's a little bit large. Let me drop it down to about, let's say 24. 24 might be too small, but we're gonna run with it and see what that looks like. That's not too bad. I don't know, it might work, it might not work, who knows, we'll see. There we go. We've got our design section, prototype, and then we need collaborate as well. But we also have to figure out what to do with this icon here. And I'm still not I'll probably have to do that off stream because I don't want to waste too much time. We only have less than 10 minutes left. One thing I might want to do, just to kind of give it more of an XD feel to this, maybe I'm going to grab the prototype wire here, right? Copy this, hop over here, and just kind of bring this in here. I'm not sure if this is going to work or not, but let's see what happens, right? So this one, maybe I'll have completely rounded, because in some cases they are completely rounded, especially when you're going to add a new interaction. Makes it a little bit thicker. And this one is going to be also completely rounded. I can just actually copy this. Oops. And I might want to make sure to use the same color as the primary button, for example. Which if I go back over here, I'm going to make sure to add that over to my assets. Use that there. Apply as border. And now I can start adding some elements inside here. So there's a plus button in here, right? Make that a little bit larger. Again, I don't know if I'm not going to go with this, but it could be an interesting touch. And then in here, because it could be a component state, for example, there's a little lightning icon. So I think it looks kind of like this, maybe. Something like this, possibly. Probably not like that. You know what? I do have one. I have one over here. I'm just going to copy this just to save some time. And there's the lightning icon. Make that a little bit larger. It looks okay. I don't know if I'm loving it. I might have to tweak that a little bit, but at least it brings in some of the XD application into this landing page. It could work. Possibly. We'll see. Now, before, let's very quickly do one more page. How much time do we have? We have about 4 minutes left. Let's do one more page. I'm actually going to duplicate this over. Actually, you know what? This probably won't work because I do want to add some animation in there, but we'll get to that eventually. Duplicate that over. I'm actually going to delete all this information because we don't need any of this. And this might be a landing page for one particular video or one particular section, something like that. So I'm going to delete all this information. I might want to, you know, I probably don't need that either. So maybe this is the repeat grid section. I created this little really cute looking repeat grid icon. I might want to use that for this area. Let me move this out of the way. I might reuse some of that text. I may not, I don't know, we'll see. Make that a little bit smaller. And I might want to kind of show off what exactly this is. So this is repeat grids. Repeat grids, just like that. Probably don't need this text layer. I can ungroup that for now, make this a little bit smaller. And maybe I'll just change the text color to this color as well. And then maybe below we might want some sort of a subheader for repeat grids. Let's say click, drag, done. Because repeat grids is super simple, right? Let's choose a different text color. Let's go for medium. We'll drop the size a little bit, right? Make sure this is centered with the icon. And I'll group all this stuff, make sure it's centered. And there we go. So now we have this kind of like repeat grid area at the top that kind of kicks off what this page looks like. And then, you know, down below we might want the actual video for repeat grids. So I'm going to go ahead and 1280 by 720. Make sure that's centered. It is very good. And I do have an icon for repeat, or a thumbnail for repeat grids right over here. I'll just drag that in there. Perfect. And then down below we might want some very quick information about what repeat grids is, like a description of some sort. Repeat grids and line 2. And of course, you know, as I'm designing this thing out, I'd probably go ahead and fill this in with actual information. But for now, we are going to just run with this, right? And then maybe I'll drag out another button, and maybe this one will be download sample file. And pop that right about there. There we go. So now that we have the start of the subpages, probably down below we'd have some more information about repeat grids, maybe some additional videos that you know, feature repeat grids and that sort of thing. But we'll probably get to that maybe next week, during next week's masterclass. We'll see. But that should just about do it for me for today. Hope you all enjoyed this. Hope you picked up on some tips. And stick around. Spencer's coming up in just a few minutes with Better Know a Brush. Great illustrator. Stick around for that. And then after that, I'm going to be back. A lot of me today. Kicking off the day 4 of the Adobe XD Daily Creative Challenge. So I'll see you all soon. Thanks for joining me, everyone.